What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday. Today we're going to be talking about Chug. What happened to it? Where is it? Where did it go? Etc., etc. But in order to get there, we need to get through some other stuff first, namely house cleaning. First and foremost, the wish list video for 2020. Obviously, a lot of people pointed out that I misnamed the Target Master. I kept saying point blank, and it's actually contact shot. But therein lies a good point, doesn't it? I messed up. That's my bad. I messed it up. But here's the gem to that. There's a lesson in there, right? And the lesson is that's how much those characters mean to me, where I can't even get their names right. Do you know what I mean? Like, so maybe that's part of that dialogue in terms of viewing my collection and narrowing it down to what is important. Maybe if I don't know what the name of that character is off the top of my head, maybe I'm buying stuff I don't care about. Maybe I should start limiting it to season 3. But, you know, I do love certain things about it, and I'll try to see it through to the end. But, you know what I mean? There's something there, though. There's a nugget of interesting algorithms in that. A couple other things, though. The Skylinks. A lot of people are like, well, what about the MMC one? The MMC one is just not scaled properly, and aesthetically, it doesn't quite fit in. It's meant to be the IDW Skylinks. If you're happy with that for your Skylinks, then that's awesome. You lucked out. But to me, it's definitely trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. It just doesn't quite fit. And I think the same went for a few others that people try to, you know, come up with reasons why I was wrong for my choices that I went. There was also mention of like the Generation Toys defense store and stuff, and look, like as a last resort maybe, but once again, that's just, it doesn't fit quite in the stylistically in terms of what I'm looking for. Push comes to shove, end of the road, end of the day, when the smoke clears, etc., etc. Maybe. If that's my only option, then maybe. But people had mentioned that MMC one, and they're right that one is supposedly coming, but until we kind of really see some really grit on that, I wasn't really counting it. All right, let's move forward. The Banana Force one went off pretty much without a hitch. There were still some people saying, but it doesn't transform. It's not a transformer, like... That's a foolish argument. There's transformer the noun and transforming the verb. Know the difference. I'll tell you what's on my list of things to get is that Dinobot Grimlock statue from Imaginarium Arts. That's on my list. That's on my list. That's a grail item for me right now. It's on my list, and I've got my sights zeroed in on it. And guess what? It's a statue of a transformer. Stop being so acute. Other than that, I don't think there's much to talk about. East Coast Toys is sending me to Karatomi Hound. Robert D decided not to get it, so it's going to be a bit delayed, but thankfully he was able to help me. East Coast Toys, a link to their store is in the description. Tell him Skully sent you, and at the very least, tell him thanks. I feel like there's one other thing. Oh! We looked at the Hot Toys Teeth Urban. Teeth Murray. I mean Luke Skywalker. And people were like, you should have got the deluxe version. It has the alternate head, and they're probably right. But I didn't, so that's what it is. Dim the rules. Alright, so let's get into Chug. I think it's an interesting conversation, and let me tell you why. Third Party is kind of built on the backs of Chugs. Chugs being Classics Henkai Universe Generations. The kind of traditional Legends, Deluxe, Voyager, Leader class scale. The main line, as it were. A lot of the early third-party offerings that we got were pretty much scaled within this. The Fans Project Bruticus, the Make Toys Devastator, a lot of the early iGear mini-bots. But around that same time came the TFC Hercules. And the TFC Hercules was significantly larger than the Make Toys Devastator. As a result, we, as consumers, started kind of splitting the two and saying that the TFC was more in line with Masterpiece and the Make Toys was more in line with Chug. The truth is that they're both in line with Chug depending on how you view it and how you sort it out, right? Kind of similar to what Fans Toys and DX9 are doing with combiner scales these days. It's sort of the same thing. If you were to look at what MMC and Unique Toys is doing combiner scale-wise in terms of Masterpiece, and look at what Fans Toys and DX9 is doing in terms of combiners for Masterpiece scaling, that's similar to how the Make Toys TFC situation was. But for the time, we as consumers, a lot of us kind of differentiated the two and said, look, this is going to be more for MP, this is going to be more for Chug, right? Well, this style of thinking lended itself to what I like to call the Chugster piece era, which is where third-party companies started creating an awful lot of Voyager plus size figures that could kind of work with your Chugs and could kind of work with your Masterpieces, and as a result, both collector pockets could kind of buy what they wanted in terms of making their collections. Now, since then, two things have happened, and those two things have made a huge impact on this scaling, and they've also made a huge impact on where third-party is Chug-wise. Before we get to those two things, let's talk about who was making Chugster piece, or certainly just Chug, third-party offerings. Make Toys, Fans Project, Unique Toys. DX9, TFC, Warbitron, Planet X, Mastermind Creations Reformatted, Toy World. Those are the companies that spring to mind. Now, there were others, but a lot of those were kind of one-offs or whatever the case may be, but those are the big ones. And they were able to cast a wider net over both collector groups. But then two things happened, and we'll get to them now. Number one is Fans Toys Quake Wave, which changed the trajectory of third party in regard to scaling for the Masterpiece line forever. It was an attempt to make a figure that wasn't trying to catch both groups, that purely wanted to capture the Masterpiece collector. And as a result, many companies started to file suit, creating figures for that line. As that began to unfold, the Chugster pieces started to go away, in part, with many of the aforementioned companies now making Masterpiece scaled figures. MMC even made a Masterpiece scale line. X-Transbots was making Masterpiece scale. KFC moved away from the more Chugster piece towards the Masterpiece aesthetic. Make Toys started to make Masterpiece, and for a while certainly put their Chug stuff on the back burner. And we saw the birth of new companies such as Bad Cube aiming purely at the Masterpiece collector. Companies that couldn't adapt disappeared, i.e. your iGears and Fans Project. The second part of this scenario is what Hasbro began to do. By knocking out most of their combiners within the Combiner Wars line and then moving on to make better quality figures with their Power of the Primes line and all that kind of stuff, they slowly started to create the entire Chug line for G1 El Total. Now, I've said a million times on this channel that if Takara and Hasbro wanted to stop third party, all they got to do is make the stuff that collectors want and it'll go away. So that's another part of that battle that was struck on third party in regards to the Chug stuff. Now, if I had to think of one more reason why Chugster Piece went away, it would be because of Toy World's Constructor. The combiners are really where the Chugster Piece flourished, and even to this day, Generation Toy kind of walks that fine line. But after Toy World Constructor came out, the dynamics and scale requirements for what meant to be Masterpiece changed. Now, that doesn't mean that they're the only ones. Unique Toys and MMC are offering smaller options that still sort of fit the aesthetic, but all three of them, Unique Toys, MMC, and Toy World and what became Zeta, were creating options that outscaled the previous TFC sort of Chugster Piece standard. Now, I think that was a smaller strain on the fabric of what was happening, but it certainly added to the sum of elements that really put a constriction on what third party could do and be successful with in regard to Chug. But there were a few companies that sort of made their way through. Mastermind Creations Reformatted. One of the reasons why they survived is because Hasbro is not creating IDW-inspired Transformers. IDW that has a very strong, solid, and committed fan base, and there's nothing for them. The other one is Planet X, for the exact same reasons. No one was creating or giving attention to the War for Cybertron, Fall of Cybertron Transformers, except for Hasbro when the game was out, but now that the game isn't profitable for them any longer, they've kind of let that go as well. And as a result, it left the gap. Everyone else is pretty much making one of two things. Masterpieces, which is becoming few and further between, I'll have you know, and Legends. With Unique Toys moving to Legends, DX9 moving to Legends, New Age popping up, which is one of the other, and Magic Square, Iron Factory covering the IDW stuff, the Legends market exploded. They're affordable, they're logistically easy on your space, and they're super well done. On the other side, the Masterpiece stuff, we had cannibalism, meaning companies eating each other, producing the same figure 4 or 5 different times in regards to competing with one another. The bar and standard is a higher level, so meeting that bar or standard is more challenging and more difficult, and companies were left in the wayside as a result. Aesthetically, it has to kind of fit within a certain pocket in order to be what it's meant to be. So there's different restraints put on this. There's a lot of freedoms put on the Legends, but half of the fan base was lost with the true Chugster pieces moving to either Masterpieces or Legends, and the other half was lost at the feet of Hasbro that created a line that subsequently satisfied the consumer in fleshing out their collection. And that's what happened to Chug. Where are they now? We haven't seen much Planet X stuff in regards to Chug in a while. They've kind of moved on to a more Masterpiece aesthetic regarding IDW stuff. MMC is still cranking out Reformatted. They have a strong committed fan base and nothing's really in their way unless Planet X gets steam with their Masterpiece stuff, which might create a division, but I don't think so because MMC has really carved out a niche for themselves. With strong releases, consistent releases, creating a dedicated fan base. But that seems to be, in my opinion, what has happened to third-party Chug. Half of the consumer base went to Masterpiece proper. Half of the consumer base was satisfied with the Hasbro offerings. And for the third-party companies, half of them either moved on to the Masterpiece offerings with the other half moving into the Legends offerings, thus leaving a void within Chug that was filled by Hasbro. Kinda bananas. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. S. Shout out to Gwen Stefani. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.